You've heard it before. Maybe you've even said it yourself. Don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. It sounds smart, empowering, like you're building a culture of ownership and accountability. But here's the truth. This is one of the most damaging pieces of advice circulating in business today. And if you're enforcing it, you're actively making your organization dumber, slower, and more vulnerable. Let me tell you why. The rule goes like this. Employees shouldn't surface problems unless they've already figured out how to fix them. The thinking is that you're encouraging people to be proactive, to think critically, to take ownership instead of just complaining. And on the surface, sure, that sounds reasonable. But let's unpack what actually happens when you enforce this rule. Picture this. You're a frontline customer service rep, and you start noticing a pattern. Customers are calling in furious because they're getting charged twice for the same subscription. It happened 6 times this week, and you can see it's a real problem, maybe a bug in the billing system, maybe a process failure somewhere upstream. But here's the thing. You don't know how billing systems work. You don't have access to the code. You don't even know who built it or how to contact them. You just know that something's wrong. So under the no problems without solutions rule, what do? You stay quiet. You don't say anything because you don't have a solution. And now that problem, the one that's bleeding customer trust and potentially costing the company thousands of dollars, just sits there, festering, getting worse. Meanwhile, 3 floors up, there's a developer who could fix that bug in 20 minutes, but they'll never know about it because the person who's discovered the problem has been told not to speak up unless they can solve it themselves. This is the fundamental flaw in this rule. It assumes the person who encounters the problem is the same person equipped to solve it, and that's almost never true. Let me make this concrete with a real example. In 1986, engineers at Morton Thiokol discovered a potential flaw in the O-rings used in the Space Shuttle Challenger. They raised concerns. They didn't have a complete solution. They weren't exactly sure how to redesign the system or what the timeline would be, but they knew something was wrong. Their concerns were dismissed. Managers wanted data, certainty, a full fix. Engineers were told essentially, come back when you have a solution. Challenger launched, by the way, and 73 seconds after liftoff, it exploded, killing all 7 crew members. The engineers were right, but they didn't have the authority, resources, or expertise to fix the problem. That required specialists, budget approvals, redesigns. They just needed someone to listen. Now, I'm not saying your quarterly sales bug is the same as the Challenger disaster, but the principle is identical. The people closest to the problem are rarely the people with the power or expertise to solve it. And if you silence them, you blind yourself. So where does this rule come from? Why do managers love it so much? Here's my theory. It's a defense mechanism. Managers, especially middle managers, are overwhelmed. They're juggling a dozen priorities, getting pulled in every direction, and they don't have time to hear every complaint or issue that bubbles up. So they create this filter. Only bring me the problems you've already solved. It sounds efficient. It sounds like you're delegating ownership. But what you're actually doing is abdicating responsibility. You're outsourcing your judgment to people who don't have the full picture. You're saying, I don't want to prioritize, so you do it for me and only tell me about the things that you've already handled. That's the opposite of leadership. Let's be clear. I'm not advocating for a culture of constant complaining. I'm not saying you should create an environment where people just dump problems on your desk and walk away. But there's a massive difference between complaining and reporting. Complaining is, this sucks, I hate it, somebody should do something about this. Reporting is, here's what I'm seeing, here's why I think it matters, and here's what I know so far about it. One is whining, the other is intelligence. And if you shut down reporting because it doesn't come with a solution, you're cutting off your organization's ability to see what's actually happening. Here's what actually needs to happen. First, recognize that discovering a problem is valuable in and of itself. If someone on your team spots an issue, especially one that's invisible from your level, that is useful information. You should want to know about it immediately, even if neither of you knows how to fix it yet. Second, understand the solutions that require resources, context, and expertise. The person who discovers a problem might not have any one of those things, but you might, or you might know someone who does. A maintenance worker who discovers cracks in a building's foundation doesn't need to be a structural engineer. They just need to report it so that you can bring in a specialist. That's not shirking responsibility, that's doing their job. Third, create a culture where problems are separated from blame. If your team is afraid to surface issues because they'll be seen as negative or not solutions-oriented, you've created an environment where problems hide until they become catastrophes. And fourth, teach people how to report problems well. There's a difference between everything's broken and I hate it And I've noticed this pattern. Here's the data I have. Here's why I think it's urgent. And here's what I've tried so far. The second version is incredibly valuable even without a solution. Now, let's talk about the exceptions, because there are situations where this rule doesn't make sense. If you have an employee who constantly surfaces problems but never engages with solutions, who just wants to complain, then yes, you have a performance issue that's different. That's someone who's opted out of problem solving entirely. Or if you're in a role where you're expected to have a certain level of expertise and you're constantly escalating issues you should be able to handle on your own, that's also a problem. A senior engineer should be able to debug their own code before escalating it. A director should be able to think through trade-offs before asking the CEO to decide. But those are edge cases, and they're not solved by a blanket rule that says no problems without solutions. Here's the bigger issue. This rule creates information asymmetry, and information asymmetry kills organizations. The people on the front lines, customer service, operations, field technicians, junior employees, they see things that the executives don't. They're closest to the customer, closest to the product, closest to the actual work. They're the sensors in your organization. But if you tell them, don't report anything unless you've got a fix, you're turning off those sensors. You're flying blind. And then you wonder why you didn't see the competitor coming, or why the customer satisfaction tanked, or why that scandal caught you off guard. It's because you told people not to tell you. Let me give you a different example. A few years ago, a major retail chain was struggling with inventory shrinkage. Theft was up, margins were down, and leadership couldn't figure out why. Turns out, store associates had been noticing something for months. Certain high-value items were being targeted in specific locations, and the security tags weren't working properly. But when they tried to report it, they were told, so what's the solution? Are you a security expert? Do you know how to redesign the tagging system? So they just stopped reporting it. Eventually, the company hired an external consulting firm, spent hundreds of thousands or maybe several $1,000,000, and that firm discovered exactly what the store associates had been saying all along. The associates didn't have the solution, but they had the problem, and that problem was costing the company millions of dollars. So what should you do instead? Make it safe and easy to surface problems. Reward people who spot issues early on, even if they don't have an answer yet. Create a process where problems get routed to the right people, not just suppressed. And stop treating problem identification as a burden. It's a gift. Someone is handing you the opportunity to fix something before it gets worse. If you're a leader, your job isn't to shield yourself from problems. Your job is to solve them, and you can't solve what you don't know about. Here's the mindset shift you need to make. When someone brings you a problem without a solution, they're not being lazy or negative. They're trusting you with the information. They're saying, I don't know what to do about this, but I think you might, or you might know someone who does. That's not weakness, that's teamwork. And if you shut that down, you're not building a culture of accountability, you're building a culture of silence. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but if I don't have this rule, people will just dump every little thing on me. I'll be drowning in complaints. And that's a fair concern. But the solution isn't to ban problem reporting. The solution is to teach people how to prioritize and communicate. Teach them to say, here's what I'm seeing, here's why I think it's urgent, and here's what I think we should do next. Even if I don't have the full answer, teach them to bring context, not just complaints, data, not just their feelings, and teach them that you're not looking for perfection, you're looking for partnership. Let me close it with this. The no problems without solutions rule sounds smart. It sounds like you're raising the bar, pushing people to think bigger, to own their work. But in reality, it's intellectual cowardice. It's a way to avoid dealing with the hard things. It's a way to shift the burden of leadership onto the people who don't have the power to lead. And it's making your organization weaker. So if you've been enforcing this rule, I'm asking you to stop. Create space for problems to surface. Build a culture where intelligence flows up, not where it gets trapped because someone didn't have a perfect answer. Because the fastest way to solve a problem isn't to wait for the perfect person with the perfect solution to appear. It's to get the problem out in the open where everyone can see it and where someone, anyone who knows how to help can step in. That's how great organizations work. And that's how you become a leader people actually want to follow.